Welcome to the Black Writer Studio, a podcast presented by the Hurston Wright Foundation and hosted by Dr. Khadijah Ali Coleman. The Black Writer Studio is dedicated to showcasing Black writers who are transforming the world today with their literary pen and creating a legacy for the culture. Prince Shakur is a queer Jamaican-American author, freelance journalist, videomaker, and New York Times recognized organizer. His writings range from op-eds in Teen Vogue to features on the violent impacts of policing. His cultural essays delve into Black icons like Bob Marley and Huey Newton. In 2017, his video series, Two Woke Minds, earned him the Rising Star Grant from GLAAD. As an organizer, he brought Black Lives Matter to his university campus, organized for labor rights in Seattle, disrupted a Bill Clinton speech in 2016, did solidarity work at the U.S.-Mexican border, and organized with Black Queer Intersectional Collective during the height of the George Floyd protests. His work, whether literary, visual, or grassroots, is steeped in his commitment to Black liberation, prison abolition, and queer resilience. His debut memoir, When They Tell You to Be Good, is forthcoming with 10 House Books in October 2022. All right. So I am so happy to finally see you in person. When I first came on as the executive director of the Hurston Wright Foundation, and I was looking through the assets, the social media assets, and just some of the things that Hurston Wright had done in 2021. One of the things that I saw was your handsome face, and listing as being the winner of the Crossover Award that Hurston Wright Foundation offers. And so seeing you and meeting you has been a pleasure, but I want to know a little bit about this piece. First of all, what led you to submit your piece for the Crossover Award? And tell us about this piece, when it was written and what went into creating this piece.
Yeah. Okay. So when did I write it and what went into writing it?
Yes, and what made you
Okay.
submit? Yeah, I
Oh
know
yeah.
I'm giving you all the questions at once, but
Yeah.
just so I don't mess up your storytelling.
Yeah. Well, I submitted because so basically I moved to Columbus, Ohio in 2018. And since the beginning of 2017, I've been a freelance writer. And in those years, I was also working towards writing a memoir. And so I had written a decent amount of the memoir by the time like I finished the memoir. Oh my god, all these dates are mixing up. I finished the memoir in early 2020, and so I was just basically for the last year or so I'd been applying to a bunch of residencies. So by the time I applied to Hurston Wright, I'd probably done about 2 or 3 residencies, and I kind of learned, like, if you have an excerpt of something that you feel really moved by and it seems to move other people, like, use that as a central piece to apply to things. And so I applied to Hurston Wright after seeing, I think, a tweet on the Writers of Color Twitter page. And I always like try to note like different opportunities. And it just seemed like a really good fit for me to apply to. And the piece that I submitted, I wrote when I was in France in 2019. I was visiting my ex-partner, and it was kind of at the point in the memoir where I knew that I wanted to write about more of my family and their background, but I personally needed to kind of get more of a bird's eye view of different elements of Jamaican culture and history. So my partner he'd moved into like a studio apartment. And so when he was at work, I would just watch a crap ton of Jamaican movies, read a bunch of articles, read books. And it kind of just opened up this door where I realized that I'd been searching for all of these stories in and around my family, and doing that research really, I don't know, it helped me contextualize some really painful things in my family's history. And it helped me put it alongside these larger structures. And so that excerpt, for people out there, it's kind of about how my mother processed the murder of her two brothers when I was 12, and how that's tied to all of these other notions about masculinity and violence. And to be honest with you, like that was the chapter in the book it was the first chapter of other chapters in the book that I wrote it. And I was just like, I just did something I've never done before. And it meant so much to me. And so when I was applying to things, I think it also meant a lot to know that that chapter could reach people so much.
When you say that you did something that you had never done before, are you speaking to the level of vulnerability, the level of honesty? What exactly do you are you speaking to, and how did that impact subsequent chapters that you've written in your memoir?
I think it was mainly I've written about my life, but I think being gay and in a Jamaican family, I went through a lot of homophobia when I came out. And even now as an adult, I feel a certain distance from my family as a means to protect myself. And so the last time I went to Jamaica before early last year was when I was 17, and I came out to my stepdad, and it didn't go well. And I don't know, I think among other things, I've just always, being gay and Jamaican American, I felt cast out. And so there's always been this kind of fear, like, will this culture that raised me also hurt me? Because it has hurt me in some ways before. And so I think with this chapter, it was my first real chance to figure out how I could write about Jamaica and how I could try to do it in a way that didn't feel completely tied to my pain, but was tied to all of these other things that led to the childhood and the life that I've had.
When I think of a memoir, I think of sharing this survey of your life, right? You are a fairly young person. And so I'm curious as to, when you're even beginning writing this first major writing project and engaging in that, and you're still really processing your youth because you're not so far removed from it. Why a memoir? Why was that the choice for your first major writing project?
Um, I mean, so there's one contextual question. I started writing when I was 12, and I got really into fan fiction and the internet. And so from age 12 to 19, I wrote 6 novels. And I was just like, I wrote fan fiction, I wrote a zombie fiction novel, I wrote a middle grade, I wrote a murder mystery, I wrote a young adult, like coming of age in college. And so in a certain way, I'd already had a lot of practice, but I do think the separation from writing as a teenager to writing as an adult, not in school, is a big shift. And so this memoir was kind of like my attempt at like tackling a book as now an adult.
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, it's a lot of it is in 2016, I went to Standing Rock, and I experienced a lot of different
Mhm.
political things. I mean, along with so many other indigenous people there that were there for way longer than me. And of course, are tied to the movement in a way that I never was. But as an ally in that space, I also experienced just a lot of trauma from
Mhm.
the riot police and the raids and certain things that I saw and experienced. And around that time, I felt like a really deep change in me, like on a political level. And I was reading a lot of political memoir. And the basic thing is that when I was 7 months old, my biological father was murdered. And it's always been something that I've known, but it's also tied to like him being abusive to my mother and that coloring like how she viewed him and would sometimes, I don't know, feel towards me as a kid. And it was just always this wound. It was like, I think ever since I was a kid, it's like the first big mystery of my life. And it's something that very few people I know can understand, like what it's like to miss someone that you never knew. And
Mhm.
so, in a way, I started writing this book because I wanted to make sense of his murder, because it's hard for people in my family to talk about it. It's hard for me to ask because I see how it affects people. And so, this book was kind of a way for me to really try to confront this huge thing that had hung over me. And also, I mean, I don't know, despite being 27, I also just, I don't know, I know I've been through a lot, and I know that I think deeply about my life and what I've been through matters. And I think it would be a beautiful world if young people were encouraged to chart their histories in really deep and meaningful ways, because even though I didn't get to solve my father's murder, this book, I don't know, it helped me become a different kind of writer, and it forced me to confront some really dark stuff in my family's history. Um, that kind of changed the project as well. And so partway through, I found out things about my father or other family members where I was just like, this is meaningful, and this is,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it was painful, but I also view it as like, it was also me giving a gift back to myself, essentially, because there are some pieces of writing in that book where I know I was able to express something that I've never been able to verbally say to anyone.
Yeah, yeah. I just from listening to you, it sounds like it's so multi-layered and it's so rich, and this experience now has the possibility to even launch further extension activities, from the book, because it was this process for you. And I'm really curious, what type of community did you have while writing this book, in terms of, what type of support? Because it can be very traumatizing to be writing a book and learning all of these things that are um, you know, while informing you about your history, they also are impacting you in your present moment. So, what types of community did you build for yourself, in terms of, outside of an editor? Were there other things or relationships that you needed to build or to have to really be able to sustain this type of really deep diving that went into creating this memoir?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I started thinking about it and kind of writing it in 2016. And I would say in like 2017, I started writing a bit more. I'd probably added about 5 or 6 thousand words. And I loosely had a literary agent who I was hoping to send a sample of it to when I was done. But in mid 2018, that agent changed careers. Um, but to give even more context, in 2018, I went to France for 3 months because I was turning 24. There was a guy there who ended up being my partner. And James Baldwin went to France when he was 24. So
Yes,
I was just like,
yes.
I'm gonna go there. And when I was there, I was working a lot towards this book, and I was like, I don't have an agent. I'm a poor freelancer. And when I was in France, I had my birthday, and then a few days after my birthday, I had an aunt visit who like we're relatively like we're fond of each other. Like she's traveled a lot. She's relatively open-minded. And she visited France, and I came out to her. She met my partner at the time. She was very accepting. And we sat down to have drinks one night. And I was kind of opening up to her about growing up in my family and like not knowing enough about my father's murder and having all these questions. And this is the moment that literally just changes it changed my life, really. She looked at me and she said, you don't know enough about your father's murder. You don't know enough about why your uncles were killed. And you should ask your mother when you go home if she knows why your father was killed and why her brothers were killed. And I can't tell you because it's not my place to say. Um, and honestly, I mean, this is in the book. And I mean, I had a panic attack that night.
Oh my goodness.
It just opened up so much
I
because
can
I was
imagine.
going into this journey, but I don't know. It was one of those moments where I was like, oh, my life is already so messed up in these ways, and this makes it even more messed up. And so I came home, and for the first time in my life, really, I asked my mother, I was like, I'd like to know the truth about how my father died. And she kind of explained like her understanding of everything. And she said, the other thing is that your father had a brother named Cedric Murray. And when your father was killed, he had it in his head that our family had something to do with it. And Cedric was in gangs. He was a hired killer, and he killed two of my brothers when you were 12. And that triple murder where my uncles were killed in. That was in 2006, I believe. And it was the first triple murder in Jamaica for years. And so suddenly this project that was about making sense of my father's murder, making sense of his destructive ways, his abuse, it opened up to learning about this uncle that I never knew that I had, who was killed in a police shootout on his birthday, I believe in 2010. And when the police searched his body in the car that he was in, he had a journal that he wrote in, and he, in a lot of ways, said that he wanted to write a book about his life. And so this book changed into like, how do I write about these men that are capable of these extremely violent things, but how do I write about them in a way that helps me make sense of it as a gay person? And it's not an easy task, and I took it as seriously as I could. But I mean, when I tell you, like, after I found this out, like, I don't know, I think I was depressed for like 2 or 3 months. Like, I feel like I was heartbroken, and I turned to as many friends as I could, chosen family, people that coached me along to like encourage me to talk to my mother. My partner helped me a lot. Like, all of my like really close friends I would just talk to, and they helped me like work through it. And I think um after that, just kind of knowing that there was this whole other part of this book, it really, I don't know, it's not that I didn't take it seriously before, but it just made it so much more important. And I will also say, like, doing residencies, like my first residency that I ever did was at Sangam House in Bangalore, India, of all places. And I went there and I got really close with some of the other writers there. And I probably wrote like a good half of the manuscript when I was there. And so for me, a lot of it was just friends along the way, other writers. I mean, kind of loosely connecting with other writers on Twitter. Like Kiese Lehman is a writer that I really admire, and he occasionally like will like give me advice online, and just like, I don't know, and honestly, just reading a lot of other Black memoirists, like reading The Men We Reaped by Jesmyn Ward, reading Heavy, reading Panther Baby by Jamal Joseph, like all of those books, I think let me know like it's okay to put this down, because and I think it's also growing up gay in a Jamaican family, like so much of the truth is what you're taught to hide, whether it's yourself or other parts of your life. And I don't know, in a way, this book was kind of like, I don't know, it was traumatic, but I think it was more finding out things in these really long-winded ways. Like, that was honestly more traumatic than writing the book. Like, the book in a way was healing, because I got to put things down that I'd always imagined and wanted to see, or hoped that someone would write in a book to help me navigate my experience. And so the book actually was more of the healing part. The family stuff was the not healing part.
But you know, that was part of the process to this book, was finding out. And you know, I got goosebumps just listening to you share that. I can only imagine being introduced to news that you didn't know at all during your life. And it's like someone here, this is part of your history. You know, now as an adult, you know, you've gone through this whole life. So now I'm sure that you went back in your mind to kind of see that, you know, when watching the movie Sixth Sense, where you look back and you see all the flashes of red, right? And all the hints that let you know what was really happening, you know, that I'm sure that's what you went back and did. It was reflect as to what were the signs that this was really the truth of my history. So I am curious as to, how do you even, because the book is picked up, right? We're going to be seeing that book. And when are we going to see that book?
It comes out this October 2022 with Tin House Books.
Yeah. That's so exciting. So once we finished, I want you to give all those details, but how do you move on from this? This was such a labor. This was the emotional labor, the releasing, the birthing of something that it was just such a big thing. How do you move past that? What do writing projects look after that? What do you engage in now, you know, as a writer?
It doesn't end, because I know there are more things related to things that I talk about in the book that I may never know, or that it'll just take me years to know. Um, I mean, it doesn't end. I mean, I also like I went back to Jamaica for the first time last January, since I was 17, and so I'd finished this book and I was trying to sell it. Like it went on submissions last January as well, and so it was kind of in that way. I went back and I stayed in the house that is still like a family home that my uncles were murdered in. I saw my sister, saw my grandmother, saw my stepfather for the first time in 10 years. And to me, what the memoir deals with, that work doesn't end. It's just like I hope in the future I can give it more complexity. But I mean, the other thing is I just really believe like, I mean, if you're trying to sell one project or it's in another part of the process that isn't necessarily editing based, or like you're doing developmental, and it's like think towards the next thing or refill the well. And so because it was the pandemic when I was going on submissions, I started rewriting the last novel that I wrote in college. And so over the last like year and a half, that's what I've been kind of working on, as well as like a little bit of freelancing here and there. But to me, it's just like if you know yourself, you know there's always going to be some kind of mess you might need to unpack. And I mean, this last novel was kind of me in some ways unpacking my breakup, which was right before the pandemic happened. And so I don't know, that's what I love about art as well. It's like I wrote this huge, massively important memoir that took out so much of me, but there is always more to explore and to unravel and to tell. And so for me, it's just like every project is a leap of faith. And so I'm just taking another leap of faith with whatever the next thing is.
I love that. And what I love most of all is that even as laborious as the process was, even though there were elements of trauma and in the reveals while researching and working on this piece, it didn't traumatize you from wanting to engage in other projects. And who knows what may come up. But I'm sure these past 2 years of COVID is a memoir in the making in itself, right? What as we close out, I really would like to know, if you had to give advice to someone who was considering working on a memoir for publishment. Look at me making up words, to be published. So I know when I've facilitated memoir writing workshops, a lot of the folks that show up are interested in creating memoir just to have, not
Mhm.
necessarily to publish or to share with other people. My own great grandmother wrote a memoir that was passed down and
Mm,
was never
wow.
published, but oh my God, the fact that it exists just gives me so much insight into my family history. What would be some advice that you will offer to someone engaging in this work, knowing the emotional labor that you really went through in order to put out your own work?
Yeah, I would say one, you don't need to write everything. I mean, when I started writing this memoir, I started writing from birth until how old I was then. And then I realized like, I don't need to tell everyone all of this. And so really just you don't need to say everything. And so really honor what things you feel you can extract from or you should extract from, and honor the things that you don't think you should.
Mm.
Um, and then I would also say another kind of tool that I used when it was hard to continue writing or I didn't know how to tackle something is I would start with the prompt um I'm going to tell you something that I've never been able to say before. And so kind of prompting yourself to dig a little deeper, because I don't know, I think it is interesting because a lot of when I hear a lot of people talk about like when you write a memoir you have to open up yourself and you can't be the hero, and I'm like, I might be the hero of my memoir, I don't know.
No,
um
that's right.
and so I think beyond that it's just like really mind the lessons that you learned along the way and how or why, because to me so much of memoir can be about telling, but what's
Mhm.
beautiful and moving to me about creative nonfiction is that is when you can build a scene out of reality. And like,
Mm-hmm.
how can you do that? And so I think another piece of advice I would just have is that trust like the subjectiveness of your experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Meaning like don't lie, don't fabricate things that didn't happen. But if there are certain things you objectively can't know, the act of imagining what the possibility of that is can
Mm-hmm.
also open up a door into you as a character or the narrator. And I say that meaning like there are certain elements of my father's life that I might never know or I don't know yet, but the act of me as the main character imagining what those things could be, it speaks to what my desires for a father are, what my desires for parents are,
Mm-hmm.
what my desires for this family that I didn't have are. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think really paying attention to those moments and finding ways that you can really, I don't know, like get people invested in the experience of what it was like to be you. I think
Mm-hmm.
is like the other big thing. And those all take practice. It takes time. There will be certain parts of your overall manuscript where you're like, I like this a little bit more than this, but just be patient with yourself because it is hard work, but when it's done and you look back at it when it's polished, I mean, I don't know. I think most people will be proud.
Wow, what excellent advice. Um, so as promised, I would love it if you could let folks know where they can learn more about you. So all your socials, and if you can give us end with when the book's coming, where we can find it and all that good stuff.
Yeah. For people out there that want to find me online, you can always check out my website, princeshakur.com. That has all of my links. You can find me on Twitter at PRSHAKUR, on Instagram at Sweet Black Prince.
I know that's
I run
right.
a podcast called The Creative Hour that you can find on any podcasting platform. It's conversations between artists. And people can also check out a newsletter that I run called Millennial Writer Life. And if you want to see me on YouTube, I do dabble into YouTube. So you can just search my name on YouTube, and I have a lot of writing videos. And my book is called When They Tell You to Be Good. It is coming
Mm.
out October 22. It's coming out October 2022 with Tin House Books. And I don't fully know which stores it'll be in, but you can pretty much buy it on Tin House's website when it's available, or a variety of other websites.
Awesome. And I hope to have you back once it has its birthday, so that we can talk about things that have probably happened between now and then, because I really see a lot of great things happening for you on the horizon. You're so talented. And I have really enjoyed your time here in the Black Writer Studio. So thank you, Prince, for joining me, and enjoy the
Thank
rest
you.
of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Yay.